which American poet inspired the likes of Bob Dylan, Kurt Cobain, David Bowie, Jim Morrison, Patti Smith, and the Beatles? The answer isn't Shakespeare, it isn't T.S. Eliot either. It isn't even Walt Whitman, though Whitman inspired the poet who did. The answer is Allen Ginsberg. But to understand Allen Ginsberg, you first have to understand the movement that he emerged from, or more so, emerged from him. The story begins in New York in the 1940s. As a student at Columbia University, Ginsberg met two people who would change the course of his life, Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs. These three took residency in Greenwich Village, which was soon to explode into a vibrant scene for writers and artists. There, they formed the nucleus of what would become known as the Beat Generation. Post-war America was entering an age of prosperity. New suburbs were appearing, consumer culture was booming, the American dream was being sold everywhere, and the Beats wanted none of it. They rejected conformity, materialism, censorship, and conventional ideas about success. Instead, they pursued experience. They traveled the world, took hallucinogenic drugs, experimented with art, listened to jazz, explored spirituality, questioned authority, and searched for new ways of living. The Beats weren't running away from society so much as searching for something society couldn't provide. The word beat itself, popularized by Jack Kerouac, referred both to being beaten down by society and to a kind of spiritual beatitude, a search for transcendence. If that sounds familiar, it's because the Beats helped lay the foundations for the counterculture movements that followed. Without the Beats, it's difficult to imagine the hippie movement, the summer of love, or much of modern alternative culture. And at the center of it all was, remember his name? Allen Ginsberg. A bearded, bespectacled queer poet born in 1926 to a Jewish family in New Jersey. His father was a poet and teacher. His mother was a political radical who struggled with severe mental illness throughout much of her life. These early experiences would shape Ginsberg forever, instilling within him a lifelong sympathy for outsiders, misfits, and people living on the edges of society. They also helped form many of the themes that would later appear in his poetry: madness, grief, compassion, and the search for meaning. In 1956, Howl and Other Poems was published and established Ginsberg as an important voice in American poetry. The poem opens with one of the most famous lines in American literature: "I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness." Howl was unlike anything many readers had encountered before. It was raw, sprawling, musical, angry, ecstatic, and deeply personal. It spoke about mental illness, sexuality, drugs, politics, and spiritual longing. Some readers considered it revolutionary, others considered it obscene, and the controversy became so great that Ginsberg's publisher was taken to court. The resulting obscenity trial became one of the most important literary cases of the 20th century. The court ultimately ruled that Howl possessed significant artistic value. The decision was a landmark victory for freedom of expression, leading to the ban being lifted on many books in the US and helping expand what writers could openly discuss in literature. Yet Ginsberg's importance extends far beyond this single poem. He was one of the first major American writers to speak openly about being gay at a time when doing so carried enormous personal risk, listing his lifelong companion, Peter Orlovsky, as his spouse, years ahead of the legislation of same-sex marriage. He became a vocal opponent of war, particularly the Vietnam War, and spent much of his life advocating for civil liberties and social change. Influenced by Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, Ginsberg traveled extensively and spent years exploring meditation and religious practice. He believed poetry could do more than entertain. It could wake people up. It could help us see the world more clearly. His influence spread well beyond literature, and his ideas helped shape generations of artists, songwriters, performers, and activists. And his connection to London runs surprisingly deep. In 1965, Ginsberg read from Howl at the famous International Poetry Incarnation at the Royal Albert Hall, an event often described as a defining moment of Britain's emerging counterculture and one of the cultural high points of the swinging 60s. In 1967, Ginsberg appeared at the very first Poetry International Festival here at the Southbank Centre. His last London performance was in 1995 at Heaven nightclub. Nearly 3 decades after Ginsberg's passing at the age of 70, His work continues to resonate because the questions he asks remain unresolved. How do we live authentically? How do we resist conformity? How do we remain compassionate in a world that so often encourages indifference? The Beat generation never offered simple answers, but Allen Ginsberg spent his life searching for them. And in doing so, he helped change literature, culture, and the possibilities of what a poem could be. What survives isn't the scandal or the controversy or even the counterculture. It's the invitation to look closer, to feel more deeply, to pay attention, or as Ginsberg would put it, remain awake. The Beats wanted more from life than a steady job, a white picket fence, and polite conversation. They wanted revelation. And judging by how many people are still inspired by them today, I suspect a lot of us are seeking revelation too.